Important video on goods and service tax. Some changes that has been applicable with effect from 1st October 2022. Now, as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, you have to check in your business whether you have applied these changes, and if you have not applied, then start to apply these changes in your business so that you would be able to make proper compliance in your business, and you would be able to create more and more organic growth with the compliances of GST. What are those changes? The first changes that has been applicable with effect from 1st October 2022 is that the one-way communications. The two-way communication is no longer, it is officially omitted. The communications between buyer and supplier through the GSTR 1, then GSTR 2, then GSTR 1A, and then 3, it is officially omitted, no longer required. So one-way communications. So the buyer or recipient is dependent on the suppliers. If supplier is not filing the tax timely, paying the tax to the government timely, the buyer or recipient would not able to take the input tax benefit on those invoices that the buyer has received recorded in the books. So the two-way reconciliations, two-way communication is almost no longer required. One-way traffic, one-way communications now started implemented with effect from 1st October 2022. So check in your business, whatever the invoices, whatever the services that you have received from your suppliers, whether your suppliers are filing the returns timely, paying the tax timely to the government, and those invoices are reflecting in your GSTR 2B that has been mandatory applicable with effect from 1st January 2022. So you cannot take the input tax credit without reconciling with the GSTR 2B. And if you are doing that, it means you are discharging less outward tax liability to the government, and might be the GST council or the GST officers will issue the so-cause notice and ask for deposit the tax which you have wrongly adjusted in your GSTR 3B. So make sure that you have reconciled your input. And now this is not a choice. This is a GST and it is not a choice. While you are furnishing the GSTR 3B and you are not reconciling the GSTR 2B while you are adjusting the input tax credit, you are violating the compliances, you are violating the law of GST. It is compulsory and mandatory applicable with effect from 1st January 2022 that you have to compulsory reconcile all those input tax credit, whatever available in your books of account, in your records, and it should be matched invoice wise with your GSTR 2B. And once it is reconciled, matched with your GSTR 2B, whatever the match amount, that would be available as an input tax credit, that is the availment of input tax credit available while you are discharging the outward tax liability, net liability through GSTR 3B. So two-way reconciliations, two-way communication is no longer one-way traffic, one-way communication has started with effect from 1st October. Know your supplier. Before you start to impanel to your supplier in your record, check all those requirements, whether your supplier is registered under GST, whether your suppliers are fulfilling the compliances under GST, whether your suppliers have all those required compliances part in GST. Check out the existing suppliers, whether the existing suppliers are reconciling all those informations data. This is very important that you as a buyer or recipient must ensure before you are going to discharge the outward tax liability, net liability through GSTR 3B. The second changes, the important changes, is the section 38 subsection 1 and 2, which has been substituted with effect from 1st October 2022. Now here what section 38 says, that the input tax credit that buyer or recipient can avail, even though it is available in GSTR 2B, the buyer or recipient cannot be able to avail those input tax credit So there are 6 restrictions that has been available in sections 38 subsections 2. Those 6 restrictions, even though the input tax credit is available in GSTR 2B, you as a buyer or recipient cannot be able to avail the input tax credit. So the important part here is that those 6 clauses, and if you are falling under those clauses, if your suppliers are falling under those clauses, you're not able to take the input tax credit even though it is available in your GSTR 2B. Now the third changes is amendment in the section 37. So what is the amendment here is that GSTR1 of the previous month, if you as a supplier has not filed the GSTR1 of the previous month, then you have to make sure to file those all GSTR1 of the previous month before you start to file the GSTR1 of the current month. So what is the impact of these changes? Government says that you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner doing the business, you are supplying something. So while you are supplying something, while you are going to file the GSTR1 of the current month, make sure that your all GSTR1 of the previous months have been filed and reconciled with the GSTR3B. If it is not, then again you have a problem. So make sure that your all GSTR1 of the previous month is being reconciled with the GSTR3B and there is no any mismatch in the revenues. The amendment in section 39 is talk about GSTR3B. So what is the amendment here? That the GSTR3B of the current month you cannot file as a supplier until you file the GSTR1 of the current month. Here again one restrictions. So what happened? If you are not able to file, if you are not file the GSTR1 of the current month, you directly trying to file the GSTR3B of the current month, again the system will not allow you. System will not be activated to file the GSTR3B, paying the tax to the government. Because this is the biggest problem. What happened to the buyer or recipient? The recipient or buyer is not able to get the input tax benefit because the supplier has not filed the GSTR1. Supplier has directly paid the tax through GSTR3B and not filed the GSTR1. It is because of that the buyer or recipient is not able to take the input tax benefit and it is not reflecting in GSTR2B of the recipient. So now government has mandated this with effect from 1st October 2022 that every supplier has to file the GSTR1 first before the supplier file the GSTR3B of the current one. So the current one GSTR1, current one GSTR3B, both are the mandatory part and it has been amended in section 39. So now understand this. How government is beautifully trying to create a system and create the strong process. GST has celebrated the 5th anniversary on 1st July 2022. Now there are a lot of changes that government is bringing to smooth the GST so that the buyer or recipient can be able to take the seamless flow of the input tax credit. And it is all about the playing of the input tax credit. A buyer or recipient has paid the tax to the supplier and supplier has not filed the GSTR1 and the buyer or recipient is not able to take the input tax credit. It means the buyer or recipient has a double impact of the GST and working capital or the cash flow is impacted of the buyer. Understand this. The buyer will not be able to make the happiest business. Buyer will have some problem in the business because buyer would have the double cost in that case, paying the invoice amount to the supplier and not availing the input tax credit in the GSTR3B. So 2 times the buyer has to do the outflow. This is the wrong. So because of this, the government has created the system where supplier has to mandatory file the GSTR1, supplier has to mandatory file the GSTR3B. Now here one shortfall is that the supplier has filed the GSTR1, but you cannot check whether your invoice the supplier has reflected in GSTR1 or not. For that, you are dependent on the GSTR2B. If that invoice are reflecting or showing in the GSTR2B, it means your supplier has filed the GSTR1 and shown your invoice in that particular returns. So you have to properly check with your suppliers, make a compliance, make a system process with your supplier, because suppliers is your extended team's partners. Suppliers is also providing the services to your customer on behalf of you. So it is your team's part. You have to check with your suppliers, although you cannot control to your suppliers, but yes, you can ask to your supplier, check with your supplier whether your supplier has shown all those invoices and paid the tax to the government or not. So government is trying to create more and more stringent conditions and restrictions, and that is the helpful to the buyers or the recipient or the persons or a business partners who are doing genuinely business, whose motive is to create more and more fundamental in the business opportunities and the growth. So it is how the opportunity in GST is created by the government to fulfill all those requirements. Now you as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, focus more on the business, compliances of the business, paying the tax timely to the government, complying with the GSTR1, GSTR3B, and all those reconciliations timely. Then you would be able to make more and more organic opportunities in your business, because GST is only one of the vehicle which is helping you to create more and more opportunities in your business. It is a business license which is providing to you. So start to find out those opportunity, make it implemented in your business and get it more and more smooth running of your business. This is how the important. So start to make changes of these in your business and get it implemented, and accordingly finding more and more opportunities in your business. This is Singh signing out. Until we meet again. Thank you. Thank you very much.